Welcome to the Apostate Apistevist channel. Welcome to the Apostate Apistevist channel. Today, I'm having on a very special guest, and we'll be talking about some topics that I've been trying to sort through a little bit on my own, namely the Israel and the conflict with Hamas. And before we get started, I wanted to kind of explain why this might be important to my listeners, as well as why it's kind of important to me. I've been feeling a sort of anguish about this situation. And I think that a lot of people are experiencing these very strong emotions. And, emotions have energy. They have things, that we can do with that. And so I want to make sure that I am thinking about this in the correct way. So I'm not taking those emotions and using them for harm when they could be used for good or anything like that. So in this discussion, we're going to try to talk about how this could possibly escalate, how this could be politically important to the United States. We're going to discuss, at least I hope, to the morality of the situation, and what Sam Harris calls the sin of moral equivalence, and some things that I don't think that we should lose sight of. And my overall goal in this is to, learn from Pastor Jeff, so that, as the Bible says, it's not good to have zeal without knowledge, nor to be hasty and miss the way. Proverbs 19:2. So with that said, I would like to introduce to you Pastor Jeff. He has a history of having fantastic conversations with me, and I appreciate that so much, Pastor Jeff.
I'm very grateful.
He has been to Israel, as I understand it, several times. You even have, I listened to your most recent sermon, and you even have like favorite places.
Right.
So I think you will be able to provide a depth of understanding that I couldn't hope to glean on my own. And I also wanted your perspective, as a Christian, as a believer, on especially the things that we'll get to talk about, like the collective sorrow, love, compassion for humanity, and that sort of thing. And I want to be very careful to clarify that Pastor Jeff is here as a personal friend, as a guest on the channel, and as someone that has subject matter knowledge. He is not here in his official capacity whatsoever. So with that, Pastor Jeff, if you're all right with it, can we jump into the discussion?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Justin, for the privilege and honor that is mine to participate in this conversation with you. I have been several times to Israel, and I have a particular love of the land. And from a Christian point of view, just to create a very brief backdrop, if you will, we always say that there are four Gospels in the Christian Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But we always say the fifth Gospel is Israel. And the only way that you can genuinely, legitimately understand Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is through the lens of the fifth Gospel, which is the actual land, which also infers culture, antiquity, etc. So the land of Israel is very important to any biblical interpretation because of the customs of the day, first century norms, etc.
Right. I think during your one of your most recent sermons, you were talking about the prisons and how the sewage systems were directly routed through those. So it definitely added a flavor to um, the text that Paul was writing there. I think it was Paul you were
That's
talking
right.
about.
Exactly.
So before we get too deep into it, I wanted to kind of make sure that the listeners and you and I are on the same page when it comes to some of these terms, because I don't feel like uh, because it's far removed. People might not understand like what these different words mean. Just like if somebody were to tell me about Indiana, I've never been to Indiana as far as I know. And so like I won't know the places and the culture and other things like that. So so Gaza, as I understand it, is sort of the Gaza Strip is a piece of land um, kind of surrounded on two sides by Israel, and I'm not sure if it's. I think it's considered part of Palestine. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, Justin, let's clarify that for just a moment, please. So, the Gaza Strip was created as a place for the, pardon me, for the Palestinians to have property.
Okay.
Now, we need to be really clear because there are Palestinian Israelis, and by that we mean there are Palestinians who are Israelis and that they are citizens of Israel. Okay.
Okay. So like a
But
dual citizenship sort of thing.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly right. So Palestinian territory is considered the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip is 25 miles long, north to south, and 5 miles wide. As you said so well, Justin, two sides border Israel, one side borders Egypt, and the whole of the Gaza Strip borders the Mediterranean Sea.
Right.
So it's densely populated, 2 million people, buildings upon buildings, people upon people in that very small space for the Palestinian country. Now, even though it's not a designated country per se, Palestine is a territory.
Right.
And so we need to clarify that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And is that the same with where like to Israel's north, where you know, isn't it Lebanon? There's a piece there that isn't that kind of like where are talking about Hezbollah, which is kind of a group within. Can you explain that relationship a
Yeah.
little bit?
So on in northern Israel, you have the borders with Syria and Lebanon. But Hezbollah, which is thought to be connected to Iran, would likely come through the north, either through Syria and or Lebanon. But Hezbollah does not exist within the country of Israel, to our knowledge.
Okay. Okay.
They would
All
have to
right.
invade from the north.
So it's a group or like a faction of some kind, not uh, not a
Country.
I don't know like a like it's different a little bit from Hamas in that Hamas is a group, but it's also like a governing group within, like a stand-in governing group for the Gaza Strip. Is that correct?
Well, I think we need to clarify that a bit, Justin,
Mhm.
because Hezbollah and Hamas would be the equivalent of gang groups. They have their own
Mhm.
identity, they have their own membership, they have their own customs. Hezbollah is a little more organized and better financed. Relative to the Palestinian territory, Hamas, like a gang group, has taken over.
Right.
And it would be like places in Mexico where the cartels run everything.
Right.
And anybody who opposes them is simply taken out one way or another. So they are not the official governing agency of the Gaza Strip, but they are the governing agency of the governing strip, or of the
Right.
Gaza Strip, I mean, because of their power. And so they have taken over.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Um, I'm really pretty concerned about this because not only from the perspective of, somebody that I care about people, no matter what they call themselves, um, or how they identify, but this has been horrific in the brutality of it, the suddenness of it, how fast it has developed, and um, I'm worried that because you know Hezbollah and Hamas, while they have their differences, they are sort of allied against is they have a common enemy in
That's right.
Israel.
Mhm.
And I believe I've seen some things from Iran saying, hey, don't go into Gaza like that. Um, you know, if you do, well, you know, there will be a response. Um, and so, when if Iran got involved, the United States is allied with Israel, so then we would have to get involved.
Mhm.
And you know, Iran is a no joke kind of army. Like it's significant. It would not be. So so then we are engaged in sort of a proxy war with you know Ukraine and Russia, though like people are going to disagree with it being framed that way, but functionally, I'll call a spade a spade. Um, but if we are also engaged with another big power like Iran, this who is also kind of friendly toward Russia, um, then that creates kind of a strategic alliance, and China sitting over there could see, hey, their attention is being split between these two big things going on. This is a perfect opportunity. Let's go and try to get Taiwan. And so and this is all happening in the framework of our our Congress being non-functional at the
Right.
moment.
Mhm.
And so this is a pretty worrying thing to me.
Mhm.
Um, what are your thoughts on that so far, Pastor Jeff?
Well, I appreciate how you have framed that because, Justin, the reason this is a crisis beyond all the obvious parts is that number one, it is a humanitarian crisis. People are suffering and
Mm-hmm.
they're suffering significantly.
Yes.
The second thing is this has every potential to become a world war.
Mm,
And and if it becomes a world war, it'll become a nuclear war.
mm,
It is not going to be soldiers on the ground, traditional warfare. It will be nuclear because that's where Iran is strongest, frankly. And then when you engage those other global powers like Russia and China and North Korea, it is a
mm-hmm.
perfect setup for World War III. And I
Mm.
don't say that from a perspective of believing that that is somehow fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I don't believe that. I believe that it's simply moving in that direction, barring some kind of intervention that would prevent that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I want to get into later is, what is it that we can do? How can we use this emotional energy, grief and anguish to do something positive? Um, but I also wanted to touch on a little bit how this could be um, potentially politically important in the United States. Um, our soft power has been, and soft power for the listeners is the power that you exert on by being perceived as a force for good. So, like when we helped, defeat the Nazis, that we were the good guys. We were perceived as the good
Right.
guys. When we negotiated all these different peace deals and started securing international trade. We were the good guys. We were protecting commerce with our navy. Um, but our standing has diminished significantly in in recent years, and I won't get in to names or anything, but when there have been agreements that we have just pulled out of, and that shows the world that we don't keep our word.
Yeah.
It's come to light that we have you know surveilled our own citizens in secret, you know extrajudicially. um, we have uh, you know we have a place where we take people to torture them legally. All of these different things have
Right.
decreased our standing as a power,
That's
and
true.
and the risk is we are in very deep with Israel, and we should be. We definitely should be. But this is a very recent, very tragic, horrific thing. It's This is an open wound for Israel right now, and with the significant fighting power that Israel has, uh, it very much, uh, could be turned into a genocide.
Absolutely. Mhm.
I believe in the people of Israel. I believe in their humanity, and I want that to not happen. But I also acknowledge there's a lot of hurt there,
Mhm.
and it's generational hurt. It's hurt upon hurt, and they're,
Yeah.
they're tired of it.
Right.
And so Israel has the right to defend itself, but I'm concerned that um, in if we are not able to effectively communicate with Israel beforehand and uh, caution
Right.
against them doing the wrong thing, we will be allied with what turns into the bad guy.
Right.
And so I'm worried about that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Pastor
Yeah.
Jeff?
Was so, Justin, if we may, if we can back up just a second, because what you're naming is really, really important in this conversation. But I do think it would be beneficial if we back up a second and say, first of all, the Palestinian Israeli conflict goes back to Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Ishmael. Several thousand years. That's how long this conflict has existed. Now, we don't have time to get into the several thousand year history, but if we could push the fast forward button and say, okay, what's been happening over the last few years? So the last time I went to Israel 4 years ago, Justin, I got back and I had a reporter ask me, what's your view of the Israelis and the Palestinians? And I said, they're both right and they're both wrong all at the same time. They both have violations that need to be named. They both are victims. They're violators and victims all at the same time on both sides. Now, again, I don't think we have time to get into that too deeply, but the brewing ground, if you will, Justin, for why we are where we are is thousands of years old. And more recently, Israel has been a bully. They have behaved like a bully. And Netanyahu has created some policies that are very oppressive for the Palestinian people. And until we can have a two-state, meaning two countries within that land that we call Israel, until that can happen, there will not be peace. So we didn't get into this overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. This has been a long drama, if you will. And I'll just give you a quick example on both sides. For Israel being bullies, you know what Israel has been doing is, because Netanyahu in particular, and I know there would be people who would disagree with me, but they need to really do the research, because what I'm about to say is a fact. Under the leadership of Netanyahu, because he represents a particular wing of the Israeli political party that tends to be radical, their whole goal is to wipe out Gaza Strip. And this was the perfect opportunity to do that.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Right?
That was one of the things that I was going to get into a little bit later was
Okay.
the things that I don't think that we should lose sight of the fact that uh, previous to this conflict, what was the situation? The situation was Netanyahu was getting a ton of pushback, both internationally and also from the people of Israel on his attempt to um, eliminate judicial review of legislation. So, he was essentially trying to give himself more power in a very, and that's what dictators do.
That's right.
Not to say that he is a dictator, but that it could go in that direction, and
Well,
that's worrying.
and Justin, you are being more kind than I, because that's right out of the playbook of what dictators do.
Yes.
Right? So the world has to hold him accountable as a stated land of democracy, because that's not in keeping with democratic principles. Now, on the Palestinian side, are there faults there? Yes, absolutely. And when you go to Bethlehem, which is Palestinian territory, what did the Israelis have to do? They had to wall it up. It's about 12 feet high. It's all concrete. And our Jewish guide is not allowed by Jewish law or Israeli law to go into Palestinian territory. And Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, is Palestinian territory. So there's a reason why they had to wall up, because of the bombings and all of that. And so both sides have been wrong and both sides have been right. What the Israelis tend to do is they go into these Palestinian territories, and what do? They build Jewish settlements. And where do they get the Jews to live in these places? They actually recruit people from around the world to occupy these settlements. And basically, they rub it in the nose of the Palestinians. We're doing this because we can. It's a bullying behavior. On the Palestinian side, there has been way too much rhetoric around violence. And on the Palestinian side, when you look at a motivating factor, I mean, as a person of faith, I have to be honest about the fact that faith is one of the reasons why Hamas did what they did. Because their particular belief is that if you become a martyr for the cause and you take out a lot of people, all in the name of Allah, then when you die, you're promised 47,000 virgins for the rest of your life. The afterlife is one virgin after another. Now, we have to be honest about that. And I don't mean by that statement that I'm being anti-Islamic. I'm not that kind of person. Hopefully you know that, Justin. But yes, I am the kind of person that says that whether we're Christian or Islamic, or whether we are Jewish, or whatever our religious tradition is, there are ethics and morals that we must follow for the sake of humanity. So one other thing, and then I'll turn it back to you, Justin, is that one of the things that has always baffled me about evangelical Christians, and I hesitate to label because that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But in America, the evangelical Christian movement has largely politicized itself. And one of their hallmarks is that we are pro-Israel, 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 and damn the Palestinians, even when the Palestinians are Christians. Now, the irony of that is that you will have Christian pastors stand behind Christian pulpits and say, we must support Israel no matter what, period, end of story. And so one of those pastors with whom I have a relationship, I said to him, what about the suffering of the Palestinian Christians who are being crushed by Palestinians who are not Christian and by Jewish people who are not Christian? They're being crushed in the land of Israel. Well, they don't matter. We're pro-Israel. Well, they don't matter and they're part of our tribe. You see, all of us have a part of this, Justin, that has contributed to where we are, if only we be honest about it, in my opinion.
Yes, certainly. It seems like a very human behavior of hurt people. And, there's a lot of hurt on both sides of this. But I'm dying to get into the moral equivalence thing, but you know what? Let's just get into it. As I was listening to Sam Harris, he was talking about this sin of moral equivalence, and to the person that's been paying attention, that cares about human beings, it could be very easy to say, okay, this side has done things wrong and the other side has done things wrong. And while that we reserve space for that to be true, and we don't want people hurt, especially, non-combatants, especially not in horrific war crime ways. The truth is even a level deeper than that, and maybe even more that I haven't realized yet. And the truth is that, like, when you have one side that by and large does try to avoid civilian deaths, that does sometimes show restraint and sometimes does prosecute soldiers that commit war crimes and so forth. You have on the other side one that not only like celebrates it, like parades in the streets, people shouting and excited about it, kind of celebrate it, but it's also like it's used as a tactical advantage. It's the weaponization of the goodwill of Israel and others to by putting rocket launchers and stuff in mosques, by putting rocket launchers in hospitals. And so they know that Israel must defend itself, and so when it does, they know that those places will be striked. And they are not only not caring at all about their own people and putting them in harm's way, but they are it, it's inconceivable if you take in your mind two different examples and you say, okay, Hamas is using someone as a human shield, and you're taking Israel, and let's say that Israel uses one of its own citizens as a human shield. What do you think will happen? Hamas will be like, yay, two targets, let's go. While Israel, on the other hand, will be like, oh no, we have to think about this situation, and we have to try to avoid the other. So the two can both be wrong at the same time, but they are also not equivalent. And Pastor Jeff, I'm making a lot of declarative statements here, and I could be very much mistaken about this, but what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Justin, I think that you're right on target. So if I can start by saying that Hamas, in the barbaric actions, which are verifiable, are evil. We can say that regardless of any or no religious affiliation we might have. The second thing I would say is that the Jewish nation of Israel must ascribe to Jewish law. And Jewish law says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And most people hear that and say, okay, that means that I can get even. That's not the intent of the Jewish law. The Jewish law is restraint.
Hmm.
You cannot exact more than was done to you.
Oh, interesting.
So the reason I think that's so relevant for what's going on right now is that, in my humble opinion, the reason President Biden is putting himself at risk by going to Israel today is because everything I've read, and I trust what I read about this, is that he is reminding them of moral restraint. You cannot do more than was done to you, or you have violated not only Jewish law, but that's then another crime against humanity.
Right. If we swing
So,
this in the other
right?
direction, you become the bad guy.
Yes. And you and I both know, Justin, that based on Israel's tendencies and based on the rhetoric, they're ready to go in there and totally destroy Gaza. And that will take out a lot of innocent Palestinians who are simply trying to live in peace.
Yes. And I do want to make the distinction there that it's really the government of Israel and not necessarily the uh, Israel people.
And I
Like
need to be right. I need to say that as well, Justin. I need to be more careful with my language. We're talking about the actions of the Israeli government.
mhm. And conversely, I've also heard that within Hamas, there are different kind of factions, like some that are, purely administrative, that, really are trying to do things. And so, oftentimes I hear that like the problem that they're having with hostages and attacks and stuff is like, okay, well, which group within Hamas did it? Which one? Which is further evidence that Israel is trying to, you know, make the distinction. But now I think, Netanyahu has the excuse that he needs, and I don't know how that got past the best intelligence in the world. That's a big question in my mind, and it strikes me that it's very convenient for Netanyahu to have a something that's, you know brings the people all together and distracts from what was going on. That aside, they could be, it's perfectly possible that it is coincidence or something else. But um, yeah, I kind of lost where I was going there because I got on so many rabbit trails.
Well, but they're all relevant, Justin. Everything you said is important to be said because there are question marks here. There are, to use the overused word, there are mysteries to all of
Mm.
this that cannot be explained, that do not fit the norm.
Right.
I have been in Israel enough times. I have been on El Al Airlines. I have been subject to Israeli intelligence because of a person who's gone several times. And your statements are right on. I spent 3 hours in an interview trying to get into Israel, and they were asking me questions like you wouldn't believe because they already knew the answers.
Mm.
And at the end of the 3 hour interrogation, they said, you have a relative with the last name of Gannon, who is a terrorist who resides in this city, in this part of the Palestinian
Mm.
territory. So there are mysteries here, and we need to acknowledge that. That's not
Mm.
to say that Netanyahu purposefully let it happen? We don't know. But there are things that cannot be explained. But Justin, I do think that that one of the things that the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which by the way currently exists, but there's hardly any power to it. I mean, they can make statements and it just doesn't have any weight. But but here's the thing: is that I have friends that are Palestinians, I have friends that are Israelis, and I am saying to my Palestinian friends, you must condemn Hamas. You have to be more vocal and join the moral outrage and say, this is wrong.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
My Palestinian friends tell me I'm very reluctant to do that.
Well, you know, it is a different situation when, you know, there's credible threat of bodily harm, you know, for being outspoken, you know, against,
and that's real too. But what I'm saying though, Justin, is now I'm thinking a little more globally, is that right here in Wichita, my really good, genuine friendships with Palestinians, I want them to speak out here.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And on the other side of that, I say to my Jewish rabbi friend, and I say to my Jewish friends, and I have many of them, and I genuinely love them and have a great friendship with them. I say to them, equally important is for you to remind all of us that Jewish law says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is restraint. Do not do what you can do simply because you can do it. You must do what is appropriate and nothing more. So both sides have been reluctant to speak out.
Oh, did I lose you?
Are you still there?
Yes, sir.
You froze just a little bit, Justin.
Yes, sir.
So I think it's important to say that again in the context of our conversation, because the United States of America, we have to be very careful. Because right now, in my humble opinion, President Biden, and I would assume most Americans, are very supportive of Israel, and appropriately so. But we have to be the voice of reason, and we have to be the ones, because of the power of the United States, the most powerful president of the world, free world, is able to say to Prime Minister Netanyahu, be careful, slow down, be aware.
Yes.
Right?
There's a, you know, when you have a tribal bond, that gives you a certain power. But with that tribal bond power also comes responsibility.
That's right.
And so, you know, when you see something going on, that is not the time to let it slide. It's a time to speak out.
That's right.
And like, so for putting that into practice, one of the YouTubers I admire most put out his channel is called Holy Kool-Aid. He put out a series that calls out the bad parts of the atheistic community, the general hateful, dismissive, you know, kind of stuff. And I loved it so much that I did a couple of videos on it, and I plan to do more. But you know, I sort of, you know, got involved in other things along the way. So, you know, if we're a part of, you know, this group that we label as Palestinians, you know, it is important for them to call out and say, Hamas is wrong. And equally, like, if you're Israeli right now, I hate to put it on people because I know they're suffering, but there is also a responsibility to say we cannot do the wrong thing here. Let us show restraint.
That's right.
And realize that, while there's generations of hurt that we can't dismiss, that needs to be named, and we got to talk this out. At the same time, we are not justified in wiping out, people from existence.
That's right.
And so, one of that kind of lends itself nicely into what we can do.
Right.
So, aside from that, I did write a letter to the White House, asking President Biden to be aware of this, and please, at least behind closed doors, ask, for restraint. So what are your recommendations to not only make it an impact, a positive impact, but also, Pastor Jeff, how do we deal with this sorrow? Like this is intense for me. What do we do?
Well, great question, Justin. And I think it's worth our time to discuss for a few minutes. The first thing that I think we need to be reminded of is exactly what our Jewish brothers and sisters experienced in their heritage, and that is the Holocaust. Why did the Holocaust go on for as long as it did? Because good people chose to remain silent.
Yes.
And I think that is a reminder to us, Justin, that in this situation, when there are injustices, when there are examples of oppression, when people are misusing and abusing power, all because they can, not because they should, then we must speak out as human beings, regardless of the tribe to which we belong, regardless of the nation of which we are a part, regardless of any other factor. It is an opportunity for humanity to speak out on behalf of humanity. And Justin, I think it's important to start there, because we have to realize we're talking about human beings. Now, all of the other distinctives that we've named have their place of importance for each of us for a lot of different reasons. But at the end of the day, we have a common humanity. And the only way, in my humble opinion, that we can in any way get compassion to be the primary virtue that is shown to people who are suffering is when we realize we are in this together. We are one people. We are human beings with a variety of diversity in so many different ways, but our unity is found in our humanity. And if we don't speak from that perspective, in my opinion, we're only representing a bias or a nuance. We need to speak passionately for the sake of humanity. Because, Justin, this event that we experienced on the 7th of October, has the potential to destroy the world.
I believe it does.
And
I don't like to, dramatize things, but
I don't think we're being dramatic. I think we're being very realistic. It has the potential to destroy the world and humanity as we know it. And that's that's obviously preventable, but only if the whole of humanity cares enough to get involved.
I do, and I think you're there with me.
Absolutely.
I know you've got another place you need to be, but Pastor Jeff, I so appreciate your time, and this was a fantastic discussion, as usual. Thank you so much for your
Well,
time.
well, you are welcome. And may I say one other thing, Justin?
Yes, sir.
I want to say thank you to you, because everything that I just said in the last 5 minutes is something that you and I share, a concern for humanity.
Yes, sir.
And at some point, regardless of where we are on a religious spectrum or ethnic, all of that, you could go down the list. At the end of the day, we must, Justin, ask for human beings to respect the dignity and honor of other human beings.
Yes, sir.
And if only we can get there, peace can rule, peace can reign.
I am astounded at how we treat one another when it seems like there is a common point where regardless of what background or anything, you can come together on, like, and you can help me out with the if I misquote this, but like the for the plan, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you hope and a purpose. um, that is the intersection where I believe I can, agree with almost all believers. And now how we work that out might look a little different.
Exactly.
But those are things we can start there, and
We absolutely can.
we can build out. And I would love to see more people like you, Pastor Jeff, willing to build together.
Thank you. And thank you again, Justin, because I am very grateful for our conversation, because I do believe it is vitally important that we engage in dialogue in order to perpetuate our democracy. So I was interviewed by the Kansas City Star 2 days ago, and one of the things that I said to the reporter is that I'm convinced that one of the ways that we share a common humanity is when we share an equal concern for the preservation of democracy.
Mm.
And a democracy is dependent on an educated electorate, which means that we have to support education.
Yes, sir.
And the very thing that we're engaged in today is an educational exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to help people realize every person has something to offer, and we live in interdependence with each
Yes.
other. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm very grateful.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Can you send the recording to me
I
when we're done?
shall. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.